Happy Thursday. Hello there and good morning. It's a great day, another day that God has given us that we may rejoice and be glad in it. My name is Timothy Ndua. This is your weekly program, My Opinion, coming to you through the Timothy Ndua YouTube channel. And we really thank God that you have kept it here. You have been our solid follower. You've been giving us your feedback, your comments, and we always enjoy interacting with you. I particularly want to thank those who have been making calls, even making inquiries, and encouraging us. You are the people who are helping us to keep moving. Tunataka kusema asante sana. We really appreciate you, and we always read your comments. Anytime you like or you place a comment there, we always follow and we feel very much encouraged. This is another day and we have a great show ahead of us as usual. Leo tunataka kuongea siasa kidogo. We want to talk about Decision 2022. And remember, in my opinion, we always say that we share that which is in our minds because we believe that we have been created differently. We think and we perceive issues differently, we reason differently, and there's a way we understand on the different issues differently. And we always say that we share our opinion, of course, with a scriptural foundation and quite aligned to the Christian faith. Karibu to the program, and it's good to have you on board. Now, next year will be an elections year, and I know campaigns have started and we have different alignments. We have different people who have already expressed interest in political leadership, who have started now going and expressing their interest to the electorate. And it is a good thing, and we ought to be prepared. Somebody said that we plan, because if we do not plan, then we plan to fail. So for us as Christians and as people who know what it means to have good leadership in place, this is the high time to think about 2022. It's not about when 2022 comes. I appreciate what our president has been saying, that this is time for development, time for politicking will come. But of course, he usually tells his fellow leaders, those who have been elected and those who have been given a 5-year mandate by their respective electorates, and they are supposed to fulfill a number of tasks. But for us, we ought to think about 2022. We ought to be sober when considering our options for 2022. And today, I want to share with us 5 things which, in my opinion, should not miss in our minds and which we should always consider as we think about the decision which we shall make on the Tuesday in the month of August as prescribed in the Constitution 2010. And the first thing that we ought to consider, and we are considering by praying for, is those who are interested in political positions. Now, apart from vetting them, which is very important, actually, we ought to vet them. Anyone expressing their interest, we ought to vet them so that we do not elect or we do not bring on board people who are beyond or who go out of the mold of values that we all believe in. And we ought to vet them. We ought to consider their character. We ought to consider their history, and we ought to consider all those other things. But above everything, we ought to pray for anybody expressing their interest in taking up a political position. I want to let us know that bad leadership comes into place when good people shy off from taking political positions. And so it is important for you and for I to encourage any good people who feel that they can offer themselves for a political position. It should not be upon us to discourage them, to tell them how politics is a dirty game or a dirty environment. It's not for us to tell them how unqualified they are. It is not for us to tell them how, by showing interest, is making them less believers of our Savior Jesus Christ. Our work should be to encourage them and to show them that indeed one can be a clean politician. One can bring the change that we need in political environment. It should be our work to pray for them and to encourage them and to actually give them our expectations. And we should do this from a clean heart, from an honest opinion, with no hypocrisy in us. And so the first thing that we ought to consider is the people who want to take over political positions. Pray for them. Pray for them. They could be pastors. They could be church elders. They could be your colleagues. They could be your parents. They could be your relatives. The moment they express that they want to offer themselves for election come next year, encourage them. Don't be the discourager. Don't be the person who will accuse them and who will discourage them that it is not possible. Don't be negative. Encourage them. Now, the second thing that we ought to consider is the process. Now, the process entails the campaigns. It entails the resources needed. It also entails the election itself. Now, friends, there are so many poor people or people who don't have a lot of resources, but they have what it takes to make the next president, the next women rep, the next member of parliament, the next senator, or the next MCA, the next governor, and so on and so forth. But we have made it that in ourselves that if somebody doesn't have enough resources, then they are not fit, because they are going there to first take for themselves enough resources. That's a fallacy. That's a fallacy that should be denied and rejected. It is not true that everybody who expresses their interest must be rich. Now think about David. David was just a mere herds boy. In fact, he came from the field, from looking after his father's goats and sheep. He didn't have a lot, but he had what it took to deliver the children of Israel, one, from the ridicule of the Philistines, from Goliath, and he led the people into the fear of God. And so I feel it should be our part to pray and to encourage as well those who are expressing interest even when they do not have sufficient resources. I've heard some people who, walishikana mikono, and they started some goat eatings, and they supported that person they felt was good enough to lead them. No, don't be the people that every time this person, because they have expressed their interest, whenever they come where you are, you must demand some things. Na wengine pia tunawapatia majina ya mhesh because we want to expect or we are expecting some money from them. And when they visit our churches, we make an impromptu fundraiser or a harabe, an impromptu one. Even without planning, we say that today, we were collecting funds for this and that particular project, even when there were no such plans before, simply because Timothy or somebody else has shown up and they want to run for a political office. Now, we ought to be ashamed in our churches. This is quite shaming if that is how we see and we perceive these people who have expressed interest in running for a political office. We ought to change that attitude. And that is how we form bad leaders. We demand too much from them. And when they get the political office, now the temptation to first recover from their losses is too high, because we demanded even beyond what they could have afforded. And when they get the position, the first 1-2 years, they want to recover the losses and the pits that they made when they were running for those political offices. Christians, let us not be the people to pressurize other people, even discouraging them from taking political offices. So let's think about the process. Let's think about the campaign. And you know, nowadays, campaigns has been about convincing people, irrespective of whether we are speaking the truth or whether we are speaking lies. Sometimes we hate those people who tell us the truth. Sometimes we want the MCA or somebody who is going for an MCA seat to do or to promise us the things that an MP ought to deliver to us. We want them to promise us the things, some even what a governor ought to do for us. And sometimes we want an MP to promise us the things that the president ought to do for us. Now, we ought to be very keen. Sometimes we give these people unnecessary pressure. And they will always promise, because we have pressurized them to do so. They will tell us how they will build all the roads, how every home will be connected with power. They will tell us how every bridge will be repaired. They will tell us how everything will be made within the 5 years they'll be in office. Sometimes it's not practical, but it is us who pressurize them to that extent. How I wish that campaigns should be an avenue to show or to showcase one's manifestos, one's vision, one's mission for the people they intend to represent. Let me go to number 3, elections. Now, as we talk about elections, let's consider the electoral body. We have IEBC in place, and the process of recruiting the additional commissioners has started. People have been told to express interest. Now, some are ladies, others are men. As Christians, how much have we prayed for the recruitment process? How much have we considered this issue in prayer? In my opinion, now, if we don't take time to pray for some of these processes, and even to air our voice towards some of these issues, then we do not have a moral ground or a legal ground to complain once we have the wrong people in place. Now, brothers and sisters and my friends, I feel, in my opinion, we ought to be active and not passive as far as the electoral body is concerned. We ought to care who is being placed there. Are they people of integrity? Are they people who can say no to any form of corruption? Are they people who can stand their ground? Are they principled to the point that they can say and stand against any compromise? Are they people who we feel will not take any sides? It was very unfortunate the other election to see that almost half of the commissioners were aligned to one particular political formation, while the other half was aligned to the other one, or they were perceived to be aligned to different political coalitions. It is quite unfortunate. It's quite unfortunate. And that's why sometimes, political parties feel that they want to be involved in the selection of the commissioners, because they feel that once we propose a name and that name goes through, it shall go there, or that person shall go there to mind about our affairs. That should never be the case. This team should be independent. It should be impartial. It should be neutral for us to get the best results. We ought to think about the elections day, how the logistics for the day, and we ought to think about, how people ought to be educated, civic education, such that enough errors are made and a lot of efficiency is achieved during that day. Think about the airing and the relaying of the results, the tallying and the relaying of the results. These are some of the things that come up during the elections day. We ought to think about them today. We ought to pray against any interference and anything that may be from the enemy that may bring a conflict during the elections period. That one we shouldn't wait until 2022. We ought to think about it today. Now, the fourth thing that I want to talk about is about the outcome of the elections. Now, today, we have started developing liking for specific parties, specific individuals, specific coalitions, or specific formations. And today, we feel that if elections were held tomorrow, maybe half of the people have already made up their mind that I can consider this or that other person, and especially if they offer themselves for the specific positions. Now, not all of them will be successful. Some will be successful and others will not be successful. Now, 2017 and 2012 and the previous election period, there have been some great effects and negative effects of parties that have been aggrieved, that have not consented to the decision of the electoral body. And so, it led to some post-election violence in like 2 or 3 elections that have passed. It made communities rise against one another. It led to people rise against one another, properties destroyed, and so on and so forth. And this is the time that as Christians and as people who are sober and who are looking forward to a stable and a more stable nation, we ought to stand and say that never again shall we experience post-election conflict after an election. We can only resolve that today. And we resolve it, one, through prayer, because prayer changes everything. But secondly, through the words that we utter, through the kind of engagements and discussions that we engage in today, and also through the people we put in the leadership positions. We ought to be very careful. And the last thing, when all is said and done, we ought to register as voters and also get set to cast that vote during the 2022 elections. That is how decisions are made. You must participate. Speaking about good or bad leaders alone does not offer any solution. You ought to take part. And this is both a democratic, a spiritual, and a moral obligation of any responsible citizen of a nation. And so, I'm assuming I'm speaking to and indeed you are very responsible people and great patriots of our nation. And so, for us to have a good outcome, my opinion, every registered voter ought to take part in the casting of votes and in ensuring that we have the right leaders in place. This is my opinion. Those 5 things should be at the top of our minds today. They shouldn't wait for 2022. We ought to be mindful of how September 2022 will be, and we can only do that today. My friends, this is my opinion over Decision 2022. You could be having a different opinion. Feel free to share with us at the comment section. Remember to share this video with your friends. Send them the link. Also, subscribe. Just clicking that subscribe button. Go ahead to click that bell so that you can be receiving notifications from us anytime we upload a new video. From the entire My Opinion family, we wish you God's blessings as you get set for Decision 2022. And from me, Timothy Ndua, it's a bye-bye for now, and may our good God bless you and bless you always. Thank you, and see you.